People have been making music for a long time, with sticks and with skins, with bows and with strings. Our need to create has not changed.
But technology has continued to evolve. 5, 4, 3... Technology has just taken a giant leap forward.
This video is brought to you by SoundCore's new headphones, the Liberty Air 2 Pro. I've been using them for the last 2 weeks, and in my opinion, they're probably the best wireless earbuds you can buy today. More on that later. When the Akai MPC60 was released in 1988, it had a major influence on the development of electronic and hip-hop music.
Hello, I'm Roger Lynn, and this is the MPC60 MIDI Production Center.
For the first time, artists could sample any sound and adapt it to their personal style using one simple, relatively inexpensive digital device.
First of all, what is a MIDI Production Center? Basically, it's a drum sampler, a MIDI sequencer, into one portable console.
While the sampler wasn't intended to work with lengthy pieces of music, just sound bites here and there, eventually artists started sampling entire ensembles, strings, bass lines, drum loops, vocal hooks, just entire bars of music.
The next option in the sounds menu is echo mixer.
Oftentimes, hip-hop producers would sample older soul and funk songs, layering, looping, equalizing, and adjusting pitch and speed in a way that many people would argue is a form of composition of its own. And as sampling technology has evolved, the ease of manipulation has improved. Roger Lynn, the designer of the MPC, later said, "It was a very pleasant surprise. After 60 years of recording, there are so many pre-recorded examples to sample from, so why reinvent the wheel?" And it was this exact sentiment that brought us to the genesis of plunderphonics, with the Avalanches' infamous debut album Since I Left You, an effortless mix of hip-hop, pop, disco, psychedelia, and soul sounds with an atmosphere that's joyful, nostalgic, and eerie all at once. So who are the Avalanches? The Avalanches are an electronic music group hailing from Melbourne, Australia. But they weren't always the Avalanches. When the group came together in the mid-90s, they called themselves Alarm 115, among many other names varying from mildly offensive to extremely vulgar. Debuting as a noise punk band, the members took inspiration from genres like krautrock, German electronica, and lounge funk, while also borrowing sounds from artists like Swans and Sonic Youth, trailblazing bands from the New York City no-wave movement. After a single EP and a few shows, the artists behind Alarm 115 stepped away from the no-wave sound and fell onto the dance floor, easing into a new wave of funk, soul, hip-hop, and electronic sounds. This was the age of new disco, a 21st century dance music genre associated with the synth-heavy 1980s European dance sounds. Released at the end of 2000, Since I Left You was a groundbreaking project made in response to the dance music of the day. But even beyond dance music, the band found themselves competing on the radio with every genre you could imagine. Many artists at the time were experimenting with humongous sounds, from soulful and heavy bass and funk disco grooves to boom-bap hip-hop and nu metal. In contrast, the Avalanches aimed to create a hushed, mono-stereo pop sound inspired by artists from the 60s like the Beach Boys, putting a twist on disco, pop, and hip-hop by giving the normally energetic beats a wistful, ambient atmosphere. They couldn't seem to contain their passion for sampling either. The album is made up from 3,500 samples and 0 live recordings, according to Robbie Chater himself. It seems apparent there's no way they ever managed to clear each and every sample, though the album has never been hit with a copyright lawsuit. With samples from old Western films to Hawaiian opera singers to completely unsourceable audio tours of Boston. I mean, seriously, there's a sample on this album that just doesn't exist. There's no record of it anywhere, and I guess you can't get sued for not clearing a sample if it doesn't exist. Since I Left You was crafted using just a few tools, mainly the Yamaha Pro Mix 1 and several Akai S2000 samplers. Band members Darren Seltmann and Robbie Chater would pick records, then sample them independently and come back together later to combine the mixes. Since they didn't go into the project with the expectation of having an international impact, their sampling tactics were loose and uncoordinated, to say the least. But when Since I Left You was released, it immediately blew up. Recognized as an instant classic in the US and a year later released in Australia, it had a similar reception. But the band didn't expect such an intensely positive reaction to their album, or really any reaction at all. Robbie Chater told Sound on Sound magazine in a 2002 interview, "Most tracks had 2 Akai S2000 programs full of samples. That's 100 groups per program, 1 sample per group, multiplied by 18 songs," implying that they were against all odds by sampling so much music from other artists. If an artist were to do that now, they'd be getting the shit suit out of them. In fact, one of the only reasons why the Avalanches got away with so many samples was because no one knew who they were. Without a reputation or modern-day copyright content ID software, no one even knew they were being sampled by the Avalanches in the first place. Since I Left You feels like a fever dream you just don't mind being stuck in. It's as though you've walked into a party where you can see everyone, yet no one can see you. The songs often begin with hushed chatter, slowly transitioning into melodic rhythms, bringing about the tune as the song goes on. It's like you're being swept away into a fantastical world in the middle of the night, where the beachfront dance parties are tinged with melancholy, and the drowsier you get, the more clarity you find, says one Stereogum article. On the opening track of Since I Left You, you enter the universe created by the Avalanches with a soft disco thumping and an echoey chamber flute recording. You feel like you're far away from the party you're headed to, but getting closer as the chatter starts to pick up. You feel like you're floating and dancing to the groove of the music, falling in line with the beat of the rhythm. Throughout the entire album, the band follows a pattern of carrying at least one sample over into the next song, making it sometimes difficult to decipher the end of one song and the beginning of another. So even though Since I Left You isn't exactly a concept album, it flows together so well as a listening experience. When I listen to Tonight May Have to Last Me All My Life, I get an inexplicable somber feeling. I feel like I'm watching a VHS tape rewind back to the start. It's an unconventional ballad painting a beautiful dreamscape. It illustrates the passage of time. You can feel it slipping through your fingers. The track tiptoes around feelings of hopefulness with an uplifting piano riff that alludes to bittersweet memories. In the words of Pitchfork, the Avalanches are expert manipulators of the tension between nostalgia and déjà vu, playing recognizable refrains off bits of songs you feel like you know, even if you've never heard them before. It is perhaps the opposite of a project like The Caretaker, whose soupy ambiance is meant to simulate the effects of dementia. In the Avalanches' music, every sound feels like a treasured memory.
Is Dexter ill today? I know Mr. Kirk. Dexter's in school. I'm afraid he's not, Mrs.
Frontier Psychiatrist is probably the most eccentric song off the record. Bordering on creepy, the dialogue is a sample of a 1980s Wayne and Schuster skit about a young boy in need of psychiatric assistance. The pompous fanfare of Enoch Lightsinger's rendition of My Way of Life intensifies the track, leaving the audience in a haze of muffled psychosis. In the end, the originality of Since I Left You comes from the production process of the record, not necessarily the lyrics or content itself. For the most part, the lyrics are vocal samples, and I think Stereogum says it best. Though many of the samples have burrowed their way into my brain as thoroughly as any original hook, from We Can Book a Flight Tonight to That Boy Needs Therapy, there are no lead vocals, just an endless parade of sounds stitched together seamlessly. Clattering beats, sliced up rap verses and disco choruses, keyboards that squelch and swirl, flickers of melody looped until they achieve some kind of zen state. It's endlessly busy, yet a wistful calm hangs over everything, a warm, woozy nostalgia for a moment you're not sure ever really existed. Since I Left You was originally intended to be a concept album. The idea was a guy following a girl around the world and always being one part behind, says Robbie Chater. But you know, in the final product, you can kind of tell that's what they were going for, but not literally, really only emotionally. Because in the end, the group decided not to get too attached to the idea of following a strict storyline, and I think they're better off for it. The vague feelings are much more pleasant and enjoyable to hear than something more literal. However, the last half of the album is especially emotional, as it seems the adventure is starting to wind to a close. The ambiance becomes muddy, melodies become more removed and ghostly, but you know, themes of love and love lost come through in almost all of the tracks. The Avalanches created a loose series of feelings that are easily relatable, allowing the listener to find their own meaning or, if they want, follow the storyline of someone chasing a love they think they've lost. I didn't talk a lot about instrumentation or music theory or anything in this video, really, and I want to say that's for a reason. There's not a whole lot of sensical structure to this album, at least not musically. Since I Left You was made completely using samples. There are no real chord progressions, no real arrangements. Every musical element within Since I Left You was put together on the fly from other sounds, looped, chopped, cut, and pasted together out of inherently incompatible samples. So in the end, the musical structure behind Since I Left You is secondary to the final product. And this is made all the more beautiful from the way the band had no idea anyone would ever even be listening to the album after it came out, let alone it reaching an international audience. In this way, listening to Since I Left You is like listening to a dream, the dream of a brilliant band with high hopes and low expectations. It's a deeply emotional listening experience that just happens to be made from found sound. And that's what makes it perhaps the best plunderphonics album of all time. The Avalanches waited 16 years before releasing their next album, Wildflower, and most people agreed it was far from a disappointment. From new disco, funk, electronic, hip-hop, and folk sounds to a dreamy but pop art feel, Wildflower resembles an almost Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band lighthearted and airy atmosphere. On Wildflower, many of the primary instrument tracks are made almost ambient by low-pass or high-pass filters, while the Avalanches experimented with original live vocals and lyrics for the first time. After Since I Left You and Wildflower exploded, the plunderphonic sound that the Avalanches became well known for became their inescapable trademark. The Avalanches' most recent album, We Will Always Love You, continues the famously known sample-heavy and hodgepodge sound, but it is more melodically and lyrically involved, with features from artists like Denzel Curry, Kurt Vile, Vashti Bunyan, MGMT, Blood Orange, Jamie XX, and Rivers Cuomo. It's perhaps their most ambitious album yet. So if you're looking for new headphones and you care at all about sound quality, which I'm sure you do because, hey, you're watching Volksgeist, I want to talk to you about SoundCore, this video's sponsor. A few weeks ago, they mailed me a pair of their new Liberty Air 2 Pro earbuds, and honestly, I've ended up using them more than any of my other listening headphones. They have a much clearer and wider soundstage than any of the other wireless earbuds or headphones I use, including pairs that cost twice as much. Battery life is also really long at 7 hours on one charge and 26 hours total with the case. And there's one thing I almost forgot to mention. The active noise canceling in these earbuds is the best I've ever used, hands down. For a $129 pair of earbuds, it's almost shocking. I'm not even kidding. It has 3 modes, one that targets low-end frequencies for trains and planes, one that targets voices and mid-frequency noises for offices, coffee shops, a loud or noisy living room, and one that targets ambient sound for being outside. You can also customize the EQ of the earbud sound inside the SoundCore app to adjust to your desired sound. Look, I don't endorse a lot of products. I keep the list short because I take my audience seriously and I wouldn't sell anyone bad equipment or services. But I can honestly vouch for SoundCore's Liberty Air 2 Pro as being a great pair of earbuds for the money. They connect quickly, they pause the music when you take one earbud out and resume when you put it back in. They're full-featured Pro earbuds and I would buy a pair with my own money if I didn't have one already. And they just sound great. In fact, like I said earlier, they're one of the best pairs I've ever used, and I've been using them every day since I got them. My one recommendation if you buy these is to use the SoundCore app to turn down the bass just a little bit. It makes them sound even better than they do out of the box. So if you're thinking about getting new wireless earbuds, and you especially want great sound, active noise canceling, and a long battery life, you can use the link at the top of the description to check out SoundCore's new Liberty Air 2 Pro. Clicking on the link really helps out my channel.